does this tell you? Ah, okay. We are now recording, no problem. What does it tell you that the SCA Incorporated was founded 2 years after we started having tournaments? It says, we, the people, are what this is started from. The corporation is there to support what we do. We are not here as underlings of a pre-existing corporation. So in the event, the corporation exists and they start having more and more say in things. And the third group is ready to become a kingdom. And in 1971, they had a big event. It was a very big event. They were only a small part of it. The event where the kingdom in the middle became a kingdom was Worldcon. It was the 1971 science fiction convention. And we started doing demos at science fiction conventions. And that's where people saw us. They saw a bunch of people hitting each other with sticks and wearing costumes. And we were, at that time, the only people wearing costumes at science fiction conventions. The idea of wearing costumes at conventions came because we were going to do demos, which meant wearing our armor and our costumes. That's not completely true, but it is mostly true. In any event, throughout the early to mid 70s, people went to science fiction conventions, saw a demo, went home and said, we got to do this, and started groups. That's how the groups on SCA started. The first group was in Stargate. 5 people went to a Worldcon, came home, set up their event. They became the Barony of the Stargate. That's one of really only 2 ways for the SCA to spread. The other is people moving in. Remember that first tournament? The guy who won it was Richard of Montreal. He moved to the Dallas area and started a branch that was called the March of the Steps. It was basically a shire for a couple of years. Now, we're part of a kingdom. By this point, everyone is part of a kingdom. But we're part of the kingdom of Atenveld. Now, what is Atenveld? There are 2 different answers for that, and it is crucial to recognize how different they are. Atenveld is a that stretches from Idaho to Florida. Also, Atenveld is the barony in Phoenix. Now, the kings and queens of Atenveld went all over Atenveld. They went all the way to North Atenveld in the northern Phoenix, and all the way to South Atenveld and southern Phoenix, and all the way to East Atenveld and East Phoenix. We almost never saw them. I mean, we're, what, 1,200 miles from Phoenix? The West Kingdom likes to divide people into the people of the word, the people who first heard about the SCA from people doing it, and the people of the book, the people who heard about it through Kapoor and through all of our documents, and found it under that. This is actually a periods approach, because the nobility in Germany in the 1300s was divided into the old nobility who assumed their own arms because there were no heralds, and the new nobility who came up after there were heralds and had to get their arms approved. So it's a very period-like distinction, but SCA doesn't fit it. The book Kapoor existed, the board of directors existed, but we didn't know anything about it, and we started pretty much our own. We are the people of the rumor. And an awful lot of how SCA works is not how other places work, because we didn't know. There's a way you're supposed to do this. Now, in a very stereotype-driven way, in the West Kingdom, if you want to figure out how to do something, you say, well, how did we do it 50 years ago? In the East Kingdom, if you want to figure out how to do something, you say, what does the piece of paper say? In SCA, we say, well, what sounds good to you? And we have all of the weaknesses and all of the strengths of that approach. but recognize that the West Kingdom approach is a laid-back Californian approach. The East Kingdom approach is a very bureaucratic-driven East Coast approach. And the, well, let's figure it out for ourselves is a very Texan approach.
Is there some reason why you're attacking the East Kingdom like that?
I'm not opposed to the East Kingdom, but I do know that it's very different.
Okay.
Um,
As a newcomer to this area, it just sounds a little aggressive.
well, I apologize. I don't mean to be insulting or offensive, but I do mean to make the distinction.
Oh, okay.
The East Kingdom, if it's against the law written on paper, you have to change the law written on paper before you do it. In Untitled, if it's against the law written on paper and you can convince the people around you to do it, and then the paper will change. You see the difference?
You've had that specific experience yourself in the East Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
I have not. I have told this story several times and people have objected to it until I got to the final line.
Sure.
If due to some ridiculous computer glitch, the Pike staff, which is the East Kingdom newsletter, and the Black Star, which is the Untitled newsletter, came out and saying, we have to fight with our fingers stuck in our ear. Everywhere, people would say that's nonsense. In Untitled, the king would call his marshal and say, get it fixed for my signature. We'll change it in the next one. In the East Kingdom, the king would talk to his marshal, say, get it fixed for the courier and my signature. We'll get it published in the next Pike staff. The difference is, in the East Kingdom, for 1 month, the fingers in the ear, because that's the rule. In Untitled, the tradition is more important than the law. In the East, the law is more important than the tradition. And both ways work. Both ways work well, but they are different. And one of the differences is something started in Untitled that changed the SCA completely and probably couldn't have happened in lots of other places. Couldn't have happened in Atenveld either if we were anywhere near the king, but the king didn't know what we were doing. Because in the mid-70s, a man joined in Untitled who really wanted to do fencing. And there's no fencing in the SCA. Everyone knew there was no fencing in the SCA. But he bought weapons. This is about the same time that Carolingia in the East Kingdom is starting fencing too. And there's a place in actually Phoenix, a couple of people have started fencing. But in Untitled, it got started and grew before the bureaucracy noticed us. And that gave us a huge advantage. In Untitled, the Principality of Untitled in 79 established the first ever award for fencing. They established the Cavalier, which had as a insignia a white scarf. Now, fencing has grown and has developed and has been done by everyone in the known world now. There are no kingdoms that don't have it. But the biggest award tradition grew out of Untitled because we could get away with breaking the rules easier than you could in other places. I don't know if you know Alice and Shosa, but they are two of the top fencing leaders in the East, and they agree with me on this one, that we were able to get away with things that they just couldn't. In any event, the point here is we grew up as a organization with no adult supervision. It was all over in Phoenix. And this led us to do some really stupid things and some really good things because we were making it up as we went along. So, eventually, the Crown of Atenveldt or one of his representatives would come through on stay or come visit an event, and it would be a rare, unusual thing. And quite often they would want to do things differently than the way we had been doing them, and that would upset us. And the Crown would leave, and we would have to find a way to sweep up whatever mess it created. And eventually we decided we didn't want to be part of a kingdom that was based 1,000 miles away. We weren't the first. Moutiers had already split off from them. That's the Deep South. But it became clear that we were our own people. And we established the Principality of Untitled, which only lasted for 3 reigns, a year and a half, which is absurdly short for a principality. Although I don't know if you've lived in any principalities. But Untitled was a blink compared to any other. In part because it existed pretty much to become a kingdom. We had our share of problems and stupid trying to figure out how to work together. And then in 79, we became a kingdom, the Kingdom of Untitled. By that time, Steps was already a barony. Now, what does barony mean? Now, I'm kind of interesting. Trying to explain things to people with lots of SCA experience and no Untitled experience, and the people with no SCA experience at all. So I'm going to bore you some of the time, and please stop me if I'm not making any sense or if there's a problem of any sort. A barony is a group that has a baron or baroness ruling over it. The baron and baroness are the Crown's representative, which can mean as much or as little as the Crown wants it to. I was Baron of the Steps for 3 years, and there were crowns where it meant that if the Crown sneezed, I'm supposed to cover my mouth. And there were crowns for whom it meant, do what you think is right and come to me if you need help. Because every 6 months we change crowns. Now, I'm getting too deeply into the bureaucracy, so I'm going to back off. We'll get back to the history because I want to get into what's crucial, which is the activities. We are not about rank, we are about doing stuff. So there are 10,000 activities. I assume most of you know that there are lots of similar organizations, from HEMA groups that do fighting and never wear costumes, to places like Amp Guard who feel a little silly to us, to places like the trained bands who seem far more strict than us. And they all are right for the people who are in them. But there is one thing that makes the SCA different from any of the others I know, which is sheer size. There are tens of thousands of people in the SCA. Nothing else is even close to that. And this is my belief. It's an opinion. You can have dozens of people in an organization that all agree on how everything should run and what the focus level is and everything else. Or you can have tens of thousands of people who don't agree and who somehow manage to get along anyway. For both good and ill, the SCA is the second one. We are not all going to agree. We're just not. We need to find a way to get along with the people we don't agree with. Now, examples. I met someone who came from one of the other groups, and people didn't like her because her shoes weren't carefully made enough. In the SCA, yes, we value people who make really good shoes, but you don't have to. There are groups that only have focus on the fighting, and if you're not a fighter, they really have nothing to do with you. These are mostly the HEMA groups. And The SCA values its fighter and its fighters, but you don't have to be one. There's lots to do. The strength of the SCA is that there are 10,000 things to do. Let's look at the arts. First of all, we started with the arts. You have to have a costume, right? For the first party, the first thing you do is a costume. So we need costumers. Now, don't get nervous. Everybody comes into the SCA not knowing how to make costumes. Some of us never learn. I've never made a costume in 43 years. Some people get great. I am wearing a costume that was made for me by several ladies. This hat was made by my daughter. It is, she can tell you the exact time and place it comes from. I can't. But that's step one, costumes. Step two, making other things we use. Plates, mugs, bowls. I'm using a mug that was a prize at a Rapier tournament. You know what? You can't buy those at Walmart. Someone has to learn to make them. We have arts and sciences competitions, and I would say something like 70% or more of our artists never enter one. They don't want to. They don't make costumes to earn prizes. They make costumes to wear clothes. They make mugs to drink out of. And that's great. That's the bulk of arts in the SCA. Now, if you get deeply into the research and find something that grabs you, yeah, we're going to recognize that and we're going to support it and we're going to give awards and things like that for it, but there's no reason to. The crucial thing is to do stuff. We get awards. I've mentioned that several times. Okay, what does it mean to get an award? Well, first and foremost, the crowned head, either a baron and baroness or a king and a queen, or now in Northern Ontario, a prince or princess, will call you into court, tell everyone what you've done that's well, and give out a scroll. This is a scroll I received last June. And for me to have a calligraphed and illuminated scroll with gold work on it requires somebody to have done gold work and calligraphy and illumination. In that case, it was Emma Farewell. We have lots of arts that are necessary to support what we do. Here is an award ribbon. It exists because somebody learned how to use an ankle loom, inkle loom. You can tell I'm not a weaver. Now, if you're interested in the arts, ask around, find people doing the arts you're interested in. Or these days, get online and find the people you're interested in because, you know, Serena, my wife, is a law, that's the top level for arts, and she's a legal scholar. She researched medieval structure of legal documents for our scroll text. She's got somebody learning from her who lives in the East Kingdom. And Eloise has found that Serena is the person she wants to talk to. This is not something that was available when I joined the SCA. In the 70s, you learned from someone who was nearby. And an awful lot of the ways we have to work together online, which have become crucial in the last 2 years, we didn't have. The mere fact of what we are doing right now is a complete change from what the SCA used to be. And that's great. We will keep changing. Besides the arts, there's the combat. We have primarily two main styles, rattan combat, chivalric combat, which is how we do sword and shield, great sword, things like that. And Rapier combat. These use metal swords. Obviously, we do have tips on them. They are not sharp. If you're interested in the fighting, come out on Tuesday evenings. we can help you. We have loaner gear, we can teach. If you are not interested in the fighting and someone tries to push you for it, come talk to me and I will talk to that person. You shouldn't be pushed into fighting, and some people are. There are 10,000 activities that are neither, excuse me, I always do this. I apologize. I am a fencer and I used to be a heavy fighter and I tend to skip the other things. We have knife action spear throwing. We have siege engines. I don't know that much about them because it's not my interest. But we have people doing it. Really, get on the Barony of the Steps page and ask around for anything you're interested in that they did then. And we will either tell you, yeah, we've done that. Your best bet is to talk to so-and-so. Or, well, you know, you're right. Mercury paints should be used for skulls, and they killed the people who used them, and we're not going to. The point is, if we can find a safe way to do it and people want to do it and it has anything to do with the Middle Ages or the Renaissance, we'll do it.
Master Robin, I'd like to give a brief shout out as well to our archery and equestrian communities.
Oh, you're right.
We have both of those here as well.
Yes. Yes, we have a big archery group in the steps now. And equestrian, there's not that many people in. Why? Horses cost more than arrows. And you have to keep paying for the horse even when you're not riding him, which you do not have to do for the arrow or the sword. Don't get overwhelmed by the number of things there are to do. Do not get overwhelmed by the people who've done lots of things. Most of us, even if we've done lots and lots of things, started with a single major interest. Even if we played with a dozen things in our first year, we generally had one major interest. For me, it was fencing first. It's an utter shock to me that I wound up in the arts and wound up a law. That was just not something I ever thought would happen. Now, let's get back to our history. Now that we have some background of the SCA. No, before we get back to history, let's discuss what actually happens. Because if you're fairly new, you haven't even seen this. The main thing, or one of the main things that happens in the SCA is events. We get together on a weekend with like 100 to 500 to 1,000 of us. And we hold tournaments and we hold arts competitions or displays or various things. Sometimes there is camping, although there's nowhere near as much camping as there was 30 years ago. This is where the biggest fighting things happen. The wars and the tournaments. You can be a fighter and never go to an event. There are lots of people who go to fighter practice and don't go to events. If you're interested in fighting and want to start, come to fighter practice, play for a while. There's no reason to go to a tournament until you feel like it. But if you've been fighting a little and you've gotten where we'll authorize you, because yeah, we have structure now, yeah. A tournament is, I think, far less threatening than a fighter practice. In a tournament, once I get hit twice, I can go away. I'm done. In fighter practice, someone hits me 5 times, I'm still fighting him. So it's actually safer and more reasonable at a tournament, in my point of view. No one has to share my point of view. Yes, Marjorie points out that her first event was Gulf Wars, and then you go to a second event, and you went to a 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 person event, and then you go to a 50-person event, you go, what is going on? Where is everyone? There are also differences from kingdom to kingdom. There were some people who came here from Ontario, visited Crown Tourney, looked around and said, where are all the people? Because in Ontario, virtually everyone comes to Crown Tournament, and there's like 1,400 people. In Ontario, only the people interested in that one tourney come to Crown, and there's like 100 people. What's the difference? I don't know. I don't know why it's that way. I just know it is. But so somebody's first event was out. Rayya, you went to Outlandish first? I've been to one Outlandish. Battlemore, okay. The point is, events are different. So let's talk about different events in On Steroid to give you some idea of what's going on. It's, by the way, it's very hard for me to talk and read the comments. So if I miss what you're saying, I apologize, but I'm trying.
I can read the comments for you and then read you any questions that pop up. That would make it easier.
Okay, appreciate it, Audrey. Let's start with the step-specific events, and we'll begin with the one we just didn't have. Twelfth Night is in the steps, is the oldest continuing feast event in Untitled. My first Twelfth Night was before the kingdom started. It was held in the principality, but the Twelfth Night feast itself predates the principality. It is usually the first Saturday after the first. So usually it's sometime between the 2nd and the 8th. They scheduled on the 1st this time. And what it is, okay, not what we were going to do last week, but what it usually is several people cook a feast for, you know, a couple of hundred of us. I've seen up to 500 people at a 12th night, but they're not as big as they were back in the 90s. So I'm guessing about 200 is average right now. We all bring our own feast gear. We have, you know, cups and plates and things like that, and you don't have to have anything fancy. There are people who have extremely fancy medieval looking place settings, and that's great. Enjoy it and then eat off an ordinary plate. The crucial thing about the SCA is that there is nothing we all have the same focus on or the same intensity on. But before the feast is served, there are these days usually events, activities, because it's mostly a full day event. You get there at like 10. There may be dancing. There may be small classes being taught here and there. There may be dancers getting together. There often is. Sometimes there's a corner where the bards are performing, singing and poetry and storytelling. Then along about 4 or 5 or 6, we'll serve the feast, which means you sit down and someone brings food out to your table and serves food into your dishes, often for several removes. The feast can take an hour of eat for a while, okay? Then they'll bring out a second remove. The Baron and Baroness of the Steps and the King and the Queen are sitting up at a head table. Now, what's a head table? You're sitting at a table where there's someone sitting next to you on both sides and someone sitting across from you, and 3 people over there. So there's 5 different people you can talk to. A head table is a place where there's someone sitting on either side of you, but no one in front of you. There's no one on the other side of the table. You're looking out over the whole feast area. So actually, it's much more fun not being at the cool kids table. I know, it didn't feel like that in high school, but it's true now. But it's a event where you talk to your friends, you do things with your friends. Often there's games. If Roffin's at the event, you can count on it. There are a lot of game boards, and he will teach you a half a dozen games before you sit down. Why? Because Roffin wanted to. So we started looking into what games were to take care of things. Oh, hi, Brian. That's your basic 12th night event that we didn't have last week because of the plague. Our other big event every year is Steps Warlord. This is Memorial Day weekend, and it is the oldest tournament in Ontario. Now, we're not the oldest barony. The oldest branch is Stargate, but they didn't start a tournament or a feast event and keep holding it like we did. That's why we have the oldest feast event and the oldest tournament. King Steps Warlord is far and away the oldest tournament in the kingdom, several years older than Crown Tourney. It is a camping event. It's one of the few events that people in Ontario still camp at regularly. Which means you bring your tent, you set up, you cook for yourself, or you go out to the nearby Dairy Palace. I haven't cooked at Warlord in years. Saturday morning is the big Warlord list. Now, this is one of the big tourneys because it's a tourney that doesn't carry any power or major responsibilities, but that the big fighters want to have won. So it's a great place to see good fighting, to face good fighters, to learn from fighters who aren't from your area. Now the tournament itself, how does the event go? Okay. That morning, you go over to the field and you go get your armor inspected, which means you take your armor and your weapons and you go over, and the marshal looks over to make sure it's safe. Meanwhile, they're setting up the Steps Pavilion where we're going to have court, because the Baron and Baroness of the court and the King and the Queen are going to hold a morning court. Okay. I'm trying to explain enough that you'll know what's going on without bogging you down in so many details that you'll be scared off. Court is where awards are given out, where announcements are made, where we use the symbols we have to make this mean something. Without court before, a tourney is just two guys in dresses hitting each other with sticks. If we have a court, if we make it something a Baron and Baroness or a King and Queen are interested in, if we announce pairings, announce who's coming to the field, it becomes honorable combat and a meeting of great warriors. Because I said the SCA is made of activities and of the symbols that grow out of them. So the goal of court is to make the symbols real. Sometimes each fighter with their lord or lady are presented to the Baron and Baroness with the King and the Queen. Just to say, it's important to us that you're here and you're doing this. The tournament is one-on-one combat. They'll call two of you out at a time. Usually there'll be like 4 different list fields, so you can't watch all the fights. It is so frustrating when there are 2 fights you really want to watch on 2 different fields at the same time. I currently have 2 fencing students, 2 cadet provosts, and twice at Queen's Champion, they were on different fields at the same time, and I couldn't watch them both. It's what happens. In any event, eventually, everyone's been defeated twice except one person. That person becomes the warlord, and the person whose favor they're carrying becomes the Queen of Love and Beauty, or perhaps the King of Love and Beauty. Now, it's a strength-based competition to some extent, and it's rare that a woman wins, but it has happened. In fact, we choose our King and Queen with a rattan tournament. And in Ontario, back in the 80s, Duchess Rowan won, made herself queen, and named her consort the king. It's happened once since then, about 2 years ago. There aren't separate lists for boys and girls. There aren't separate lists for, sometimes there are. There are occasionally women-only tourneys. There are occasionally tourneys for people over 50 or for people who've been fighting less than 2 years. But generally, you're out there competing with everyone. And that helps to make it real. Now, I'm not objecting to the other tourneys. They're great. I've actually won a tournament, an over 50 tournament. Having said that, I was 60 when I won it. And how does it happen that we have this kind of a tournament, somebody decides they want it. If you want to run a tournament for redheads under 5'6", you can run it. And no one will object, and we will support it.
You're going to give people ideas that way.
What?
You're totally going to give people ideas that way.
Fine.
Redheads.
Fine. I held a truly stupid challenge 3 years ago. And make no apologies for it. I took every weapon and thing I had for the rapier field, which was over 20 rapiers, over 10 daggers, and said, I will use anything. You pick my weapons, you pick your weapons, just because I wanted to. The essence of the SCA is it's a co-op. You are no longer people for whom we're putting this on. You're part of the people putting it on. I'd been active in the steps about a year when I became an officer for the first time. If you want to help start doing the work, great, we need you. The week before Steps 12th Night, there were announcements on the Barony list. We need more people to run gate. You know what that means? We're ready to trust you with our money right now. Isn't that incredible? But it's true. And we don't get hurt by it. In any event, at Warlord, there will be other events. There is usually Steps Champion, which is a rapier tournament. It is a relatively new tournament. It didn't start till 1988. How can I be 87, excuse me. But it's become one of the tourneys that a lot of rapier fighters want to win. We have a huge advantage here in the Steps. We are both in the center of the kingdom and at the intersection of just about every interstate that runs through the kingdom. We're on 35 and 45 and 30 and 20. And it's easy to get here from most places in the kingdom. Now, if you live in Sea Winds, it's gonna, which is Corpus Christi, it's gonna be really hard for you to go to an event in Tulsa, which is Northkeep. But Steps is not too far away for anyone, so we get fairly big events compared to others. What this means is when we have our Warlord again, and I know we haven't had it in the last 2 years, I'm frustrated too. But the next time we do have a Warlord, we're gonna need your help putting it on. Really. Because it's a big event and it takes a lot of us. And part of what that means is when I decide I want to hold a bizarre rapier challenge, I'm going to need some people to help me. And when you decide to hold your tournament for redheads under 5'6", you're going to need people to help you. We are not putting on events for you. We are putting on events for each other. That has strengths, it has weaknesses, but welcome to the working crew. In the evenings at Warlord, there may be a bardic competition, a performing competition, poets and storytellers and singers. And you never have to do this if you don't want to. That didn't used to be true. But now there are enough people who do want to that no one's going to push you to sing if you don't want to sing. People stopped pushing me to sing when they heard me sing. But there are lots of events at Warlord because lots of people put them on. I feel safe to say that at the next time we have a Warlord, there will be an embroidery competition because Khalida decided to start running it in the 80s and she's still running it. The SCA works because we work it, all of us together. That's what makes the SCA great. Okay. Those are the biggest steps events. The events we have to charge money for. Why? Because it costs a couple of thousand or more to rent where we hold Warlord. We need to pay for things. But fighter practices, guild events, and all those things that we haven't had in the last 2 years because we can't have people over at our houses. I mean, yes, we have some of them. We do have fighter practices, but we have restrictions on them. One restriction is coming back this Sunday. We are going to have to wear masks even when we're outside again, because we want to stop the, yes.
I thought activities were suspended until the 16th.
That's correct. After which, and the 16th is Sunday. After that,
I mean, a week from
when we can
Sunday.
get them back, we'll be wearing masks. I don't know the current details. I know I didn't have to go to fighter practice on Tuesday. I know I'm frustrated because I haven't poked anyone this week. Really, this annoys me. I've done 120 lunges every day this week just to have a sword in my hand. It's about the activities, but even more, it's about what the activities stand for. I can't go through all of the things that matter to everybody. I'm going to use as examples the things that matter to me. This is not because I'm saying the things that matter to me are more important. I'm saying these are the ones I know the most about. The fencers on SCA, because Tyvar started this and he thought it was a cool idea, reenact the cult of Gloriana. This is the Elizabethan, 16th century when Elizabeth was queen, focus on her as the fount of all honor. And the fencers uniquely don't swear to the crown. We swear to the queen. Every fencer at Queen's Champion swears, I, Robin of Gilwell, swear upon my honor and upon my sword to defend the life of our queen and to preserve her good name and honor. And yeah, I did not have notes for that and I do not need them. Queen's Champion is something that the queen is giving to us. The winner of the biggest fencing tournament on SCA will be her champion for 6 months. The symbol of the queen has become big for us. Any particular reason why that's big for us and not for fencers in the same way in some other kingdoms? Just the history of it. Somebody who's listening to me right now is going to come up with some symbol that matters to them and make it matter to 3 or 4 people next year and make it matter to 10 people the year after that. And someday it's going to be one of the on traditions. Because the thing I can promise you, beyond question, is what the SCA will be 5 years from now is not what it is today. I know that having taken part in a revolutionary change in the SCA in the last 10 years. We will maybe get to that, but it has to do with the SCA award structure. Okay, getting back to my notes. I keep having to flip back and forth between my notes and my the Zoom meeting, and it's so if I look distracted, it's because I'm distracted. Next event I'm going to talk about is Gulf War. And to the people who've been to Estrella or to Penzik, most especially Penzik, Gulf War seems like a nice little war. To people who've been to unsterile events in Gulf War seems like the biggest event you've ever seen. It's not the biggest event in the SCA. That's Penzik. The East and the Mid-Realm have that, and we'll never touch it. But 20 years ago, 30 years ago, oh my goodness, Onsteor had been having a war with the Outlands. We had 3 wars with the Outlands in like 89, 90, 91, I believe. And they were lots of fun, and they were They attracted a lot of people, and it didn't work. For several reasons, and one of them is we took who won and who lost too seriously, and Onstero won the first three, and it kind of died. Sorry, Rayya, it's true. Actually, no, the second one, that one's kind of won. In any event, Onstero now goes to war every year and has for 30 years. Well, every year when we can, with Trimeris, which is the kingdom in Florida. We meet in Glenarvan, which is the kingdom that includes Mississippi. Now, there is no way Onstero could beat all the other fighters who showed up. There's no way Trimeris could beat all the other fighters who show up, because fighters show up from every other kingdom. And a large part of the run-up to Gulf War is the Crown's trying to get more and more kingdoms to come fight on our side. The same thing happens with Penzik on a much bigger scale. But in March or so, we get together with several thousand people. And for me as a fighter, one of the biggest rushes in the entire SCA is a big open field battle at a war, when there's hundreds of people on both sides. At Penzik, it's thousands of people on both sides. I haven't been to one of those. At Gulf War, pretty much anything you want to have happen will happen, because somebody somewhere has decided to. There are events all day long, every day for close to a week. There is a huge merchants area where people, the SCA has grown so big. This was not quite true when I joined, but became so over the next 15 or 20 years, is so big that people can make a living selling things in the SCA. And Merchants Row is a huge, huge row of tents. And if you go to a war, you're going to spend at least one afternoon somewhere just going up and down, looking at everything everyone has to offer.
I bring a cart with me when I go to Merchants Row.
Good plan. I didn't last time, and I spent most of my time going up and down carrying a full bolt of cloth.
Right. It's either a cart or a bunch of friends like, hey, I'm going shopping. You want to come with me? Great. Hold this. Hold this.
People were telling me I should have a cadet do that. But my two cadets were a double peer and a duke, and in neither case was I able to do that. The thing about a war is you meet lots and lots of people from every kingdom, and you come away, if nothing else, knowing that they don't do it the way we do it.
Master Robin, we have a question.
Yes.
It says, I'm often very busy and worry about my ability to attend practices or events. Is there any problems with that I should know about?
Okay. Yes and no. First of all, if you can make one fighter practice every 3 months and you want to do that, that's fine, and no one's going to get bothered with that. When you get to a tournament, you're going to face some people who have fought twice a week. You won't beat them. Right? Okay, that's simple. Everyone in the NFL is practicing every day. There are good fighters who are really trying to focus on getting it right. I told you how frustrated I was that I have not poked anyone today, this week. It's been frustrating for 2 years that we haven't been able to get to practice regularly. Now, we will, when you show up at practice, we will train you and we will fight you. And no one will have a problem with how much or how seldom you show up. Okay. People legitimately have a problem when I don't show up because I'm supposed to train them. But you don't have that responsibility. Show up when you can, and that's fine. If it becomes important to you, you will make time for it eventually. But that's a year from now when you fall in love with it. And you will decide what your priorities are. And I can't change the fact that people who practice more learn defense better or learn to fight better than people who practice less. That's a simple fact of life. But no, it is not a problem that you can't be there all the time. Come play when you want to and have fun with it, and I will teach you when I can. But if you get where fighting is that important, you will make time for it. And sometimes that means, okay, it's on Tuesday night and I can't make Tuesday nights. Does anyone want to come over to my house and fight in my backyard on Thursday night? And lots of people have done things like that. When we can, we get together on Sunday afternoons too. So there's more than one opportunity. So the answer is, it's like every other activity in the entire world. The more you do it, the more you do it. But you don't have to. Did someone else have a question?
Someone was asking about practices, like all the practices local to here, since this area is so big.
Okay, right now we have a Tuesday evening practice, and well, right now there's nothing. We've shut down everything because of the incredible, I looked at the graph this morning, I was horrified of people getting COVID. But when we are doing what we're doing, what we plan to do, there's a Tuesday evening practice in the Steps, which is in Richardson. There was a Wednesday evening practice in Elsie, which is in, I think Euless, it might be Bedford, I'm not sure. But it's in the southeastern edge of the Fort Worth, the northeastern edge of the Fort Worth area. There are often Sunday practices. Every once in a while, there are practices from other areas where they're bringing lots of people and they advertise them. 2 months ago, I went to a practice in, I think it was Livingston, Texas. It was the Barony of Gray. Why can't I remember this? My wife came from there. In East Texas. And they had got, like 30 people there at that practice, including people from several different baronies. So there are other possible practices to go to. In the DFW area, you need to look at Steps and at Elsie. And if you're willing to go as far as Euless or Bedford, there's a Wednesday night practice too. And I've sometimes done that, and right now I can't. Well, right now no one can, but there are practices of it. Graywood, thank you, Hugh.
Is Glassland?
Glassland is up north in Denton on Mondays.
Yes.
If you want to drive up there.
Gabe, really, it's okay. The thing about the SCA is none of us share the same intensity for anything. All of us have different priorities and different rules. And as much as you want to do, you can, and nobody can say you have to do more, and everyone would like to see you more often. Back in early 1920, before the shutdown, I suddenly was not going to practice for several months. Why? Shoulder surgery. No one has complained. Everyone has been supportive. And I'm one of the ones who's supposed to be teaching people. So yeah, it's okay. Have we hammered this one into the ground yet? Okay, Hugh, did I meet you back in the late 80s? I see the comment that he went to school with my wife. All right, where were we? Okay, let's go back. We discussed events. Let's go back to our history. We had gotten to the early kingdom. Now, In the final reign of the principality, we did something bizarre. I mentioned this. We gave an award for fencing, the first one ever. It was the White Scarf. It's the only principality award that has never been closed. In the second reign, the name was changed to the White Scarf of al-Ruqay'a. It was given a grant of arms, and in essence, in 79 and 80, we reinvented what al-Ruqay'a was going to be, at least what the awards would be. The crucial thing to understand about the awards is they only work if we care. And they only work the way we care. And let me give you the perfect example of this, because I am just absolutely in awe of the fact that the people decided this one. There is an award called the Sable Falcon. It's a gold ring with a black and gold ribbon on it. And everybody wears this, who has one, wears it on their belt with the gold ring going through the belt. Now, the original idea for the award was you would tie the strings, the ribbons, to your belt, the ring would hang down, and you would use that to hold your rattan sword. That was the goal. But nobody did it, so that's not what we do. Because it doesn't matter what the piece of paper says if we're not going to do it. And a few years later, they established the Queen's Rapier, which is a similar award for fencers, except with red and white striped weaving on it. It still has the gold ring, big enough to hold a rattan sword. Because that's the tradition, because the tradition matters. Now, this is not a class on awards. I don't want to get too far into it, but the awards don't determine what we value. Crowns, kings and queens, and barons and baronesses set up awards because we already value things. There are peerage orders. These are awards that are constant throughout the entire SCA, through all 21 kingdoms. And we're not going to get into the details of them, but the point is, that's for everybody throughout the known world. There are awards for al-Ruqay'a. And nobody outside of al-Ruqay'a needs to care about them or even know about them. There are awards for the Barony of the Steppes. I am currently wearing an Oak of the Steppes. That is the #1 service order for helping the Barony of the Steppes. It is also...
Master Robin,
Yes.
awards are actually the topic of our next class, along with courtly
Okay.
graces.
Okay, great. The point of, for today's class, the point is, the symbols matter only if they matter to us. We don't tell people you have to care about this. We make it worth caring about or it dies. Because this is a co-op. It works if we work it. Now, we are at, we've gone through several. Okay, I want to go through something that makes it easier to understand what's going on, because there was a lot of cognitive dissonance in the SCA. Because we're trying to combine medieval and Renaissance elitism and structure with modern American communalism and feel-good egalitarianism. A certain amount of cognitive dissonance is going to happen. And it cannot make sense until you realize that it separates into 3 different levels. People get mixed up because they think there's 2. There's the real level. The level at which we poke people with swords or hit people with sticks or actually do embroidery. The real world. I am Jay Rudine. I teach statistics. I am a consultant. And I put on weird clothes sometimes. There was the medieval paradigm. The Elizabethan, I am trying to emulate. The person who lives in London, serves Queen Elizabeth, is a baron in her court, and neither of those are what happens at events. A lot of people get boxed up looking at just those two. In between is the on level. In some other place, it's the Outlands level or the East level. I don't think of it as the Scadian level because I'm not being an SCA member when I am in this level. I'm being an on, a subject of my king and queen, a supporter for the baron and baroness, a teacher of my students. This is where the on symbols are. The ones where what makes me appear are the laurel or the pelican or the collar, rather than in England, what would make me appear as the barony, or the real world in which being a peer means nothing in America. We live and work on the on level, and its purpose is to connect the real level where we're actually doing things, where we really are two people in dresses hitting each other with sticks in the cow pasture, and connects that to a medieval tournament, to a affair of honor, to a chivalrous encounter. Now, I'm sure persona is going to come up somewhere. We're going to talk about it very briefly, just because it's part of an introduction to the SCA. A lot of people take persona very seriously. They want to react to you as the Elizabethan nobleman would, as the Viking would, as the Persian dancer would. And that's great, and it's fun for the people who want to do it, and you don't have to. Like every other activity in the world, in the SCA, some people are going to take it more seriously than you will, and some people will take it a lot less seriously than you will, and that's fine. But the goal is to make this more than just a bunch of 21st century people in funny clothes. Now I say that's the goal. That's the goal for me. I don't just want to hit people with a piece of metal. I want to do it in honor of my lady and the grace of the queen. I don't just want to recite poetry. I want to pull you into the story of the Baron and the battle he fought. That's my goal. Now, you don't have to have that kind of goal. If all you want to do is the athletic competition of fighting, that's fine. If what you want to do is make fun costumes, that's fine. Just recognize that there are other people with different focuses and different goals. And if you want them to accept your focuses and goals, then you need to accept their focuses and goals. This works better when we work together. This can't work at all if we don't work together. Okay, that's a very brief idea of what the SCA is. And I'm sure I left out lots and lots of things. So, any questions?
Thankfully, we have a number of other classes to cover more things, like personas and awards, and how a court happens.
Well, I have a question. Since you mentioned that you're a light fighter, and here in Calatier, we have cut and thrust. Can you explain the differences between light fighting and cut and thrust and why they are two different things in the SCA?
Yes. Yes, there are two different things in the SCA. Okay, the simple answer to your question, I will get the real answer, but the simple answer to your question is they are different things because they require different armor. I have to wear more armor when I do cut and thrust. Now, first of all, let me give you my background. I say I'm a fencer. That was my first love. I am certainly a established cut and thrust fighter. I certainly am a long-term heavy fighter. And in fact, I have the Grant Order for Chivalric Combat. I just can't do that anymore because with the arthritis in my neck at age 66, every blow hurts. So yeah, I understand the differences. The difference between cut and thrust and rapier is a difference in armor, a difference in what the weapons are, and a difference in how we use them. This is my rapier, one of my rapiers. It is primarily for thrusting. I can do a draw cut. Well, I put it on the neck and draw it, and that's a kill. What I can't do is a percussive cut. Why? Because we're not armored for it. Because there's nothing on the back of my head. And if you do a wrap shot to the back of my head with this thing, you'll kill me. Or you'll at least break my skull. Now, I can actually use this on the cut and thrust field, this blade. I can't all my rapiers, but this one I can, and I have. In fact, I used this in a cut and thrust tournament 2 months ago at Queen's Champion. And I thrust twice, taking him out because he wasn't ready for it. But the difference is what the armor and weapons let us use, let us do, and therefore how we can fight. Every fighting style has its compromise. Now, I don't know as much as I'd like to, but I know there are differences between standard cut and thrust and what started out as Cal and steel. I believe Cal and steel has gotten a lot closer to standard cut and thrust. But the differences are what armor we're wearing, what weapons we're using, and therefore what we can do with them. It changes, once you cover the back of your head, you can do some things you can't do without it. Every combat style is a compromise. And if there were people here, if everyone here cared about fighting, I would go into a great deal more detail. But the real answer is which compromises we're making. Does that help?
Yeah, and I I do want to share that, probably a lot of the differences with Callan steel is Callantyr has very big, the big attitude of we have to do everything different here. Like they won't take anything at face value. Like they can be told like, hey, there's this new thing that everybody's doing, but they're like, okay, that's great, but we're not going to do it that way. We're going to do it our own way. We're going to put our own spin on it. And that's probably why Callan steel is so different.
Yes. I know who Master Pavel is.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It is
And
not
his
an
hamsters.
accident, I think, that Callantyr's greatest contribution to the SCA culture is a wall.
Yeah.
The Callantyr shield wall,
Right.
which is phenomenal, but it's also a great symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And Callantyr is what it is, and for lots of people, that's great. I'm not going to speak against it, although I have been close to spat upon visiting Callantyr a long time ago as a fencer.
Yeah, I don't think we do. We don't have any fencing up here at all.
The last Gulf War I went to, Callantyr was fighting beside me on the Rapier field, and I was agog. It was wonderful to see. But yeah, the difference is what weapons we use, what armor we use, and what that lets us do.
Okay.
Come to fighter practice on a Tuesday when we can have it again. I'll show you more differences.
It's a bit of a drive for me. I live in Kansas City.
Right. Anyone else? Any questions? Really, I've answered every question. Either that or you're not willing to ask them. Either way. Thank you for listening. Thank you for putting up with me. I do have opinions. I try to keep focused on we're all different, and that's fine. But that doesn't keep me from having my own opinions.
Thank you, Master Robin. I don't think we could have found anyone better to give us the history of Ansteora and how we got to where we are today here in the steppes.
Thank you to everybody who came out and joined us.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
having
It's good to see you guys, even though we can't gather this weekend.
Hopefully next month, we will have another class in person at the Irving Library on February 3rd. That class is going to be on courtly graces, courtly proceedings, awards, peerages, and I think that class also includes the officers of the barony, who they are and what they do. So a lot of gritty info, but
That's
good
going to be a
to
lot of
know.
information.
Today was a lot of information too.
Yes.
For any armored fighters here on Tuesday, in lieu of our regular armored practice, we will be having video review since we can't meet. So Magnus and I will be leading it from 7 to 8, and then Duke Sven, one of the best fighters in the SCA, will be going over more advanced stuff from 8 to 9. I suggest everybody stay for the whole thing from 7 to 9.
All right.
Okay. I think we can let everybody go unless you guys want to hang out.
Thank you, everyone.
All right, thanks. Have a good
Thanks.
night.
Bye, guys.
Thanks for having us all. My hope is that I can have my PC up and running a little better next time. This thing's a
Maybe.
fossil from 2013. I still need to get some new parts, to say the least.
Thank you for going through what you had to get here.
Yeah, I just booted up my phone, downloaded the app, and I was like, "Ah, crap, I gotta get on." Because I felt like I was running a little late.
Hopefully we'll be able to live stream also next time. Just with us not being able to meet in person, it messed up my plan. So
I felt like it messed up a lot of people's plans.
well, Robin got to watch me last time I had to set up a live stream. It was just me sitting in my friend's living room like, everybody be quiet.
Pure panic was what it was.
I told everyone there would be a live stream, and there was a live stream, damn it. And it was really pretty.
It was awesome.
It went really well.
All right.
You
Well,
guest
now that I've
speakers
tooted
and
my own
everything.
horn, I can go. Everybody have a good night.
Good
Hopefully
night,
y'all
everybody. It was
see
good to see y'all.
Have a good one, everybody.
Good night.
Great seeing you all. I'm gonna head out for the time being.
See you.
See you,
Good night,
everybody.
everyone.